Good morning. It is Tuesday, August 11th. Our readings for today will be Psalms 28, Genesis 39, 1 through 23, and Romans 9, 14 through 29. Here are the readings for the day. Psalm 28. Don't turn a deaf ear when I call you, God. If all I get from you is deafening silence, I'd be better off in the black hole. I'm letting you know what I need, calling out for help, and lifting my arms toward your inner sanctum. Don't shove me into those same jail cells with those crooks, with those full-time employees of evil. They talk a good line of peace, then moonlight for the devil. Pay them back for what they've done, for how bad they've been. Pay them back for their long hours in the devil's workshop, then cap it off with a huge bonus. Because they have no idea how God works or what he is up to. God will smash them to smithereens and walk away from the ruins. Blessed be God, he heard me praying. He proved he's on my side. I've thrown my lot with him. Now I'm jumping for joy and shouting and singing my thanks to him. God is all strength for his people, ample refuge for his chosen leader. Save your people and bless your heritage. Care for them. Carry them like a good shepherd. Genesis 39. After Joseph had been taken out of Egypt by the Ishmaelites, Potiphar, an Egyptian, one of Pharaoh's officials and the manager of his household, bought him from them. As it turned out, God was with Joseph and things went very well with him. He ended up living in the home of his Egyptian master. His master recognized that God was with him, saw that God was working for good in everything he did. He became very fond of Joseph and made him his personal aide. He put him in charge of all his personal affairs, turning everything over to him. From that moment on, God blessed the home of the Egyptian, all because of Joseph. The blessing of God spread over everything he owned. At home, in the fields, and the Potiphar had whom given himself was eating 3 meals a day. Joseph was a strikingly handsome man. As time went on, his master's wife became infatuated with Joseph and one day said, "Sleep with me." He wouldn't do it. He said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master doesn't give a second thought to anything that goes on here. He's put me in charge of everything he owns. He treats me as an equal. The only thing he hasn't turned over to me is you. You're his wife, after all. How could I violate his trust and sin against God?" She pestered him day after day after day, but he stood his ground. He refused to go to bed with her. On one of these days, he came to the house to do his work, and none of the household servants happened to be there. She grabbed him by his cloak, saying, "Sleep with me." He left his coat in her hand and ran out of the house. When she realized that he had left his coat in her hand and run outside, she called to her house servants, "Look, this Hebrew shows up, and before you know it, he tries to seduce me. He tried to make love to me, but I yelled as loud as I could. With all my yelling and screaming, he left his coat beside me and ran outside." She kept his coat right there until his master came home. She told him the same story. She said, "The Hebrew slave, the one you brought to us, came after me and tried to use me for his plaything. When I yelled and screamed, he left his coat with me and ran outside." When his master heard his wife's story telling him, "These are the things your slave did to me," he was furious. Joseph's master took him and threw him in the jail where the king's prisoners were locked up. But there in jail, God was still with Joseph. He reached out in kindness to him. He put him on good terms with the head jailer. The head jailer put Joseph in charge of all of the prisoners. He ended up managing the whole operation. The head jailer gave Joseph free rein, never even checked on him because God was with him. Whatever he did, God made sure that it worked out for the best. Now hear our New Testament reading from the book of Romans. Is the grounds for complaining that God is unfair? Not so fast. Please. God told Moses, I'm in charge of mercy. I'm in charge of compassion. Compassion doesn't originate in our bleeding hearts or moral sweat, but in God's mercy. The same point was made when God said to Pharaoh, I picked you as a bit player in my drama of my salvation power. All we're saying is that God has the first word, initiating the action in which we play our part for good or ill. Are you going to object? So how can God blame us for anything, since He's in charge of everything? If the big decisions are already made, what say do we have in it? Who in the world do you think you are to second guess God? Do you for one moment suppose any of us knows enough to call God into question? Clay doesn't talk back to the fingers that mold it, saying, Why did you shape me like this? Isn't it obvious that a potter has a perfect right to shape one lump of clay into a vase for holding flowers and another into a pot for cooking beans? If God needs one style of pottery, especially designed to show His angry displeasure, and another style carefully crafted to show His glorious goodness, isn't that all right? Either or both happens to the Jews, but it also happens to other people. Hosea put it well. I'll call nobodies and make them somebodies. I'll call the unloved and make them beloved. And the place where they yelled out, You're nobody! They're calling you God's living children. Isaiah maintained the same emphasis. If each grain of sand on the seashore were numbered, and the sum labored chosen of God, they'd be numbered still, not names. Salvation comes by personal selection. God doesn't count us. He calls us by name. Arithmetic is not His focus. Isaiah had looked ahead and spoken the truth. If our powerful God had not provided us with the legacy of living children, we would have ended up like ghost towns, like Sodom and Gomorrah. How can we sum this up? All these people didn't seem interested in what God was doing, actually embraced what God was doing as He straightened out their lives. And Israel, who seemed so interested in reading and talking about what God was doing, missed it. How could they miss it? Because instead of trusting God, they took over. They were absorbed in what they themselves were doing. They were so absorbed in their God projects that they didn't notice God right in front of them, like a huge rock in the middle of the road. And so they stumbled into Him and went sprawling. Isaiah, again, gives us this metaphor for pulling this together. Careful. I put a huge stone on the road to Mount Zion, a stone that you can't get around. But the stone is me. If you're looking for me, you'll find me on the way, not in the way. And here ends our readings for the day.